What is up, everybody? Ginger here. I'm going to be making today's video on Tumblr and Pinterest quote photo manipulation. In this video, we're going to be using GIMP as our main photo editing software. And we're going to be going on Tumblr, DeviantArt, and maybe even Google Images to find our photos to manipulate. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to show you a couple of quote graphics that are actually used on Tumblr right now. And some get a relatively good amount of feedback from the Tumblr community, but right now I'm going to show you a couple of quote graphics from Tumblr. I'm not going to get into Pinterest right now, but we'll keep Pinterest in mind. So here are a couple of the quote graphics that I've taken off of, but I'm showing you from Tumblr. This one's from stillthehappiness.tumblr.com. I don't know if that's a quote from someone, but regardless, they're using it in this graphic as kind of like an overlay text, which is kind of cool. Another one is this one, which is kind of like a definition graphic, kind of showing you what atelophobia means. People relate to that, so it's got 312 notes, which isn't a whole lot, but still, that's definitely worth the time that they put into this photo. The next one is from, and by the way, that one was from Caught in Your Hipster. Apparently, Tumblr is a big hipster social network, but we're not going to get into that. Next is Sam is Off the Wall, and this one is kind of like a typewriter on paper type look. It's kind of cool, I guess. It's got a little less notes than our previous one did, 151 notes. Like I said, still definitely worth the time putting into it if you're going to get 151 notes. This next one is from dryyoureyes/startbelieving.tumblr.com. This one, they did kind of a text overlay with a drop shadow on the text and then a blurred background. This one's very easy to do, not hard at all, and we're going to go into a few things that will help you kind of play around with blur, placement, drop shadows, and certain text you can use to kind of give it a specific feel, and searching for the correct images for those type of quotes. This one is a shape design oriented quote graphic. It's more on the graphic design side, because with these it's just photo manipulation. It's creating something from a photo that has already been taken, but this one you are clearly creating graphics from scratch. You're not using any images, you're not using external sources, you're using just what you have with your program and creating a design up based off of that. So that is a graphic design quote piece. We may go into that, but with what I show you today, you should be able to make something close to this. And then this is a very simple piece. We can't really see how many notes by number, or 21 notes, so it's not nearly as popular as these other ones. This one has 29, this one has 33, and that one has 151. So this one has the least amount, 21. I think it's mainly because as a user cannot understand exactly what's going on here. So fitartistic.tumblr.com, hit them up to ask them what they meant by this, if you'd like to know. I'm not entirely dedicated to knowing what this means, so we're just going to skip that and then just go straight into the tutorial itself. So that's all of the images that will be related to what we're doing today, and let's go ahead and get started. First, we got to figure out what quote we're doing. We got to figure out if we're going to take it from someone else, and if we're going to take it from someone else, we got to make sure we have the correct source. Or we could just make your own. In other words, you're going to create your own quote based off of your thoughts and then put it on this graphic, which is what I usually do, because I don't like taking quotes from other sources. It doesn't really fit with my personality as a creator, so I usually just use my own quotes. So I'm going to open up Evernote real quick and pick one. I think I've already picked one, so actually it's not taking straight from my quotes, but I'm going to do something like, "You'll never understand the meaning of true love." Because no doubt all of us probably have that one person that we fell in love with didn't quite understand either what satisfying us was or just being loving to us or vice versa. So you'll never understand the meaning of true love. That's kind of a general statement, so I'm just going to use that in this graphic today, just as testing. So that is our quote, and we're going to now search for images that's going to be relatable to that quote. So we can either go Google Images, which we might run into some copyright issues with, or we could just go to DeviantArt and go to the resources and stock images. Usually these are free without consent, but you really got to make sure that you read the description of the image that you plan on using before using it. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to go to the DeviantArt front page, and then you just go down here to the bottom, resources and stock images, and it'll bring you to the correct page of searching resources and stock images that you should be able to use for free. So let's try to do a landscape search real quick. This one looks pretty cool. And so we'll just use this one. We're reading here. See my journal for usage guidelines. Okay, so we're gonna need to go in and see her journal real quick since she didn't link it to us, which is kind of rude, but whatever. And she's being very specific about how she wants us to share our experience with her stocks. And I doubt I'll be using this stock for more than 30 minutes. If I do, this is not worth the time. So let's just move on then. The bigger the image, the better, because the bigger the image that you grab is going to be higher quality when you shrink it down. So let's just go ahead and copy image. We're going to move both of these off to the side because we don't really need these right now. I have a dual monitor. If you don't, then just leave it as is on the page and just open up GIMP to get started on your quote image. Okay, so now we're going to do full screen, and I'm going to show the toolbars by hitting tab if they aren't showing. You can hide and show these sidebars or toolbars by hitting tab. You got to make sure that you are selecting the main window before doing that, or it won't hide. So if you unhide them and this is selected and you try to hit tab again, it's not going to work. So you got to hit the main window. So there's that. So I am just showing my hidden toolbars, and we are actually going to make the size of this first. Usually you're going to want to make the width 500. At least that's the default width for Tumblr, from my experience. So I think this is a good width for you to start off of. So 500 in height, I'll just go to 1000, something crazy, so that we can adjust it after we paste in the image. So let's just go ahead and do that, 500 by 1000. And let me just copy this real quick to make sure it was copied. Let's just open a new layer, which is this little page icon over here by the layers toolbar. And we're going to rename it images or image. Hit OK. And then we're going to paste the image in there by hitting Control V, or you can go to edit and paste. Well, the way I scroll out is I hit Control, I hold down the Control key, and then use my middle scroll button. So we're just going to zoom out, and then we're going to hit Shift T, or do the scale option, which is right here. Do that, and then we're going to hit this little link icon over here, just click that, and it will make sure that the width and the height will stay at a 1.1 ratio. So let's go ahead and bring it down, bring it up so it fits with the document. Let's scroll in a little bit, and then shrink it down so that it's relatively fit. Give it a little bit of room so you can kind of move it around a tad, just to kind of, I guess, give it the right feel. If you wanted to kind of give it more of a half and half feeling, you could bring it up like that, but I'd prefer to just have this sky a majority of the image, because that's usually how it is. So let's just hit scale, and it will scale it down to just where you put it. And then you can hit R, or hit over here to the rectangle tool, and select on the outside of the box so that it will deselect it and place the image right where you'd like it. Now we're going to crop the canvas to the image so we can just fit the dimensions to the image that we just pasted in. So we can do that by hitting Shift C, which is crop, or this little crop tool button over here. So we're just going to select up here and then drag down. By default, it will stay within the guidelines of the image itself or the canvas itself. And we can just drag it down to about here. And then you can just double tap the inside of your selected area to finalize the crop. There you go, or I think it was just one select, not entirely sure. But not a big deal. One select or two selects, either way it will get the job done. So now we have our image. This is at 100%. It's a little bit less on detail, so we're going to have to sharpen it up a little bit, but we're not going to do that quite yet. We're going to do that towards the end so we can kind of see the finished product as we sharpen. Hopefully I don't forget, but that is my intention. So now we're going to take our quote. You'll never understand the meaning of true love. And we are going to paste it into the text. So with the GIMP window selected, we're going to hit the T key for text, or we could just go ahead and hit this button over here with the text tool, and then you just either click and drag or just click wherever you want. Doesn't really matter. We're going to be moving and adjusting after we paste in the text. So you can click or click and drag. So I'm just going to click, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste the text in there, and then Control A to select all the text that we have currently pasted. And then I'm going to scroll through all of these fonts until I get the right feeling one. And if you don't have a lot of fonts, I'm going to create a font installation tutorial right after this video. So if you're watching this video right as it's uploaded, then it will be there soon, but otherwise you can look for my installing new fonts tutorial. The font website that I usually go to is actually dafont.com, and you can find a bunch of different styles, and you can just kind of cruise through, or you can do some searching. Usually I like thin stuff, so that's one that I would usually search. So that's where you can get a majority of your fonts to kind of play around with your quote graphics. And just to keep in mind, these quote graphics are not, in my opinion, which might lead to the actual truth, quote graphics are more of a fan-based graphic. So I don't think you really need to think about copyright issues unless it is an obvious graphic that has been used multiple different times and will obviously have some copyright issues, or even with the fonts themselves. Just be careful with what you use. So, like I said, I'm actually going to bring up the font size, and what I'm doing here, you can see I'm not clicking anything. What I'm doing here is actually scrolling in this little text box area up and down to bring the size of the font up and down. So let's just bring the size up a little bit so we can actually see the font itself. And now I'm actually just going to hit the down arrow key until I find the font that I want. So yeah, that was relatively fast. I kind of like this one because it kind of gives it like a scripty feel to it. So let's actually bring the size down again to about, let's actually keep it at about a 40. Then I'm going to go over here to the tool options and justify it to center. And then I'm going to shrink down the size of this text box and bring it to the edges of this canvas. What that's going to do is it's basically going to center it based on the canvas of the image, so it will be like a true center. So next is I'm going to kind of hit the enter key to where I'd like a new line to be created. Either that, or we can just size up the font. So based on how much room we have here and how little text we have, we are actually going to bring up the size a little bit. Let's actually leave it about 80. And then what we're going to do is just hit enter till we get to the correct number of lines to make it look relatively spacey. It's kind of hard to explain, but just keep it relatively centered and easy to read. So let's go ahead and hit the image layer and hit the M key for the move tool, and we're actually going to select the font or the text and click and drag to move it down, and to keep it to justify to vertical and horizontal and even 40-degree angles, you can hold the control key to kind of keep it steady. So I'm going to move it to about the center. It's not the true center of the image, which is fine, but we want it to be relatively centered. So we're going to just put it right there. And I should have said this before, but you can either use what I'm using now, or you can use your own image and your own quote. I prefer for you to use your own quote because I think it's better to kind of venture on your own rather than just copy what somebody else is doing, per se, from their exact sources. So enough said about that. Now we're actually going to change the font color of the text. So let's go ahead and go back to our text tool. We're going to select the text just by clicking once anywhere where the text lies, and hit Control A to select all of it, and then go to the color white over here, and we're just going to hit OK, and that will change the color to white. And usually when you have white text on kind of a lighter background, there's a couple things we could do. We could either darken down the background image, or we can add a drop shadow to the white. We're actually going to do both right now, just to kind of show you how to do both. So you want to have the image layer selected, and you're going to want to go to colors and curves. This is the best way to lighten up and darken an image, no matter what image it is, because you have basically control of the light and dark of the image in a specific sense. So let's go ahead. I think this way is lighten up and this is darken down. So we're actually going to darken it down here. Bring it down a little bit farther so it doesn't affect nearly as much as the image. Because if we go to the center here, it will darken down all of the image. So we don't want that. We only want a couple areas of the image to be darkened. So let's just try to keep it as subtle as possible. And if that doesn't work and it begins to look a little bit too darkened, not to your taste or liking, we'll just go ahead and hit cancel. And what we can do is, like I said, add a drop shadow. So what you're going to want to do is select the alpha, or select the given pixels in this layer to get the same shape of the text to create that drop shadow. So we're going to select the text layer, we'll right click it, and then go almost all the way to the bottom and hit alpha to selection. And that will select the, in a sense, the pixels that are existent in this layer, which is the text itself. And then next we're going to go ahead and select new layer and name it drop shadow. And then you're going to hit Shift B, which is actually the bucket tool. You can select it over here or hit Shift B. And then we are going to put in a black drop shadow. To do that, you can actually click inside the selection to fill up that selection with black. And once again, you want to make sure that your drop shadow layer is created and selected before you do this, because you don't want to be adding black to a layer that you don't want to add black to. So let's go ahead and click it, and that will create the black drop shadow behind the text itself. So let's go ahead and hit the R button or R key for the rectangle tool again, and then just select on this outer canvas area to deselect. And next we're going to want to see what we did. So let's actually hide this text layer. So then we see our black text. That was basically what the text looked before we changed it to white. But now this is in a different layer and is created specifically for a drop shadow. So now we are actually going to either keep it as is if we want kind of like a sharp drop shadow, or we're going to blur it. So I'm just going to leave it as is for now. We're actually going to zoom in and move it down just by 1 or 2. So I'm just going to do 1. And then I'm going to show the text layer again. And see, it already has kind of a drop shadowy feel to it. Let's actually move the drop shadow down a little bit more. We don't need to hide the text layer for this because we can already see the drop shadow. But we're actually going to just bring this down 1 more, just kind of see what it looks like. I think that looks a little bit better, but I'm not quite liking that. If you like that, then we can just play with the opacity just to give it kind of like a subtle drop shadow. But I think I'm gonna like the blurred drop shadow a little bit better for this. So there's that. We're gonna bring it down to about a 3, and we might want to move this up, but we're going to just leave it as that, just bring it down a little bit as far as opacity. And I think I like that a lot. It's very subtle. It's about at a 12 to a 14 opacity percentage. But I think I like that. Another thing we can do is actually, to darken this back image, is create a layer that kind of is on top of the image to just give it like a black sheet effect, basically. We're just kind of putting a black sheet over this image. So we're going to hit create new and just put darken, I guess. And hit shift B for the bucket tool, and it's already on black, so we're good. So just go ahead and click anywhere. And that will just create kind of a black background. And to give it that kind of shade, we are going to bring down the opacity, and that will darken it up kind of in a better sense. Rather than trying to edit all the pixels in the actual image itself, this will actually create just kind of like a black film over the image itself. So that's what you can do. Let's bring it to 0 just to kind of see our original image, and then just bring it up from there to see where we'd like to stop. I think that is about it right there. And if any of you guys are wondering how this works exactly, you guys might be getting a little frustrated with it. You can either scroll like this, you know, scroll on the middle scroll key on your mouse, or you can actually see this will do like a dragging sense, but you kind of have to be dramatic about it. But if you go up towards the upper edge, it will create like a specific selection, so that way you can just drag it back and forth to the, like I said, specific selection. Let's go back to where we were, and then we are going to give the text kind of like a cast shadow rather than a drop shadow. Let's just go back and alpha to selection, the text again, and then we're going to create a new layer called cast. And with this, it's a little bit tricky because you want to make sure that you are casting to only each line, not the whole thing, because the whole thing doesn't look very good. So let me just show you what I mean. You can hit this blend tool or hit the L key for the blend tool. And then what you want to do is select this area right here and go down to foreground to transparency. So that way you don't have any other colors kind of getting in the way of your shading. So let's just do that. I'm actually going to show you, like I said, what that looks like. So that looks not so great compared to what we're going to be doing in a second. One thing you can do as a trick to kind of make this more of a subtle shade is either you can bring down the opacity, or you can just zoom out enough to give it more of a subtle shade. See, and now you can barely see it, but it's enough to make a difference. But what I prefer to do is actually just do this bottom line first, not the whole thing, just the bottom line. So let's go ahead and do that. Bring it relatively down low so it gives it more of a subtle shade. I don't know if that's enough. Let's bring it up a little bit more to give it less subtlety. And there we go, I like that. And now here's kind of the tricky part. You have your rectangle tool selected and you actually hit the control key. You hold the control key down and then you make a selection. And this will actually deselect whatever you have already selected. So let's go ahead and just click and release, and then do the same up here. Click, drag, and release, and that will deselect the bottom line. So now we can move on to the next line. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so that's it, and that gives it kind of like, I guess, a 3D feel to it. I don't know. The shading is a really important thing when you want to make things look like they're either 3D or they just look more realistic. So there's that. I'm going to do one more thing real quick to kind of show you how you can, I guess, if you really wanted to do this, make everything the same color. So let's actually create a new layer and name it CV for copy visible, or you can name it whatever you like, but I like to call it CV. So let's go ahead and add that. And then a cool trick that GIMP allows us to do is copy what we actually see. It's going to basically, in a sense, save the pixels that are currently being shown. So let's hit Shift Control C, which will copy everything that we see here, and then hit Control V. What that does is Control Shift C will copy the visible layers, and then Control V is obviously paste. So with that, we can hit colors over here and colorize, and that will change the color of the whole image itself. So we can give it kind of a better moody color, but that's not quite what I want to do with this one. So we're actually going to delete that. I just wanted to show you how to do that real quick. Another thing that I like to do is kind of give it a, hopefully I don't butcher this word, I don't know if I say it correctly, but a vignette to give it like darker edges. With that, we can add a new layer. We can call it VIN for vignette, or we can just outer shadow it, kind of give it more of a technical term. And then we can just zoom into the edges up here. And if you guys want to know the quick way to kind of drag it around, my mouse kind of sucks at this, so sometimes I actually don't have the ability to kind of drag the image around like you see me doing. But if you have, like I said, the scroll wheel, you just press the scroll wheel and drag the mouse around to the direction you'd like to move it, and that will move the image around. So let's go ahead and just create a couple shapes here with the freehand tool. So just hit F for the freehand tool, or free select tool, and we can create shapes here that will influence a vignette. So let's go ahead and just follow my lead. It's kind of hard to explain what shape I'm creating here, but just see what kind of shape I'm creating and try to do it yourself. So yeah, there's that. So basically what I did is I shrunk the shape down over here to kind of give it like a subtle blur when we decide to blur this for the vignette effect. Then I made it gradually pop up to this edge, and then I just made a couple cuts to kind of give it like a edgy feel, and then I brought it down to a thinner shape down here as well. But what we're going to do with that is we're going to fill this up with black, and then we are going to copy and paste this whole area. We're going to copy and paste this shape and bring it to each edge of the image. So let's go ahead and do that. So hit Control A to select all, and it's going to select the whole canvas. Control C to copy it, and then Control V to paste it. And then what we're going to want to do is select this tool over here, which is the flip tool, or hit Shift F, and we're going to flip and paste it 3 times to each edge. So let's go ahead and do that. So right now we have it pasted, and we're going to move it over here by clicking once. Okay, and then we're going to paste again, which is going to bring it back over here. And you hold down Control to do it the other, which is vertical. We just did it horizontally, so let's do it vertically. And there you go. Let's hold Control, and it will verticalize the flip. And then just paste again, and then do both. Do horizontal and vertical to bring it down to this corner. So horizontal, Control, vertical. There we go. So now we have our laydown for the vignette effect. So next we're going to want to blur it so it actually gives it that vignette effect. So filter, and before we actually used Gaussian blur, so let's just go ahead and hit reshow Gaussian blur so we can edit the settings. So we're going to want to go up to a corner to kind of see what the Gaussian blur is actually doing to the vignette effect. So we're going to want to bring this up pretty high. So you're going to hit this up arrow and hold it for a second to kind of give it a second to speed up to the hundreds or 200s. And looks like about maybe 140, 150, maybe even 160. Around that. And then we're going to hit OK. And as you can see, it is already giving it that vignette effect. So there's a couple things we could do here. We could play with the layer modes up here, which will either blend them in or create like an opposite or do some other stuff with it. So let's just go through all of these layer modes. I just basically select this and then select normal to kind of select that area. And then I use the arrow keys to move down each one just so I can look at the image and see what I really like to do with it. So that gave it like kind of like a subtle blending, and that's overlay. And this is giving it kind of like an opposite effect, which is grain extract. Same with that one is divide. And that's it. So that's one way we could do, or we could just bring down the opacity, which is what I'm going to do. The other thing about GIMP is that it's kind of sketchy as far as saving an image. They have different terms for different ways of handling their files. Now, they didn't used to in the past, but now they do. Saving is actually just for saving your project, so it'll only save it in XCF or I think PSD sometimes. But to actually save it as an image, you have to go through the export option, which is something that they did in a newer update. It really threw me off when they did that update. So to really save this as an image, you're going to want to go to File, Export, and then save your image. If there's any particular ones you'd like me to go over as like style, like those other ones I showed you in the beginning of this video, then go ahead and request them in the comment section below. Just give me a URL of the image and then I will just go over what they're doing, and I will actually go through it with you in the next tutorial Thursday or even sooner. If I have a lot of free time on my hands, I will do a tutorial that's not even on tutorial Thursday, or I'll wait. It really depends. So like I said, if you find one that you really like and would like to know how to do it, then hit me up in the comment section below. Be aware that there are some quote images that actually require Photoshop, because there's some like waving text that appear in some quote images that is either really hard to do on GIMP or is available to do on a GIMP. It just doesn't do it quite as well. But it may even require Illustrator. But like I said, just go ahead and request in the comment section below if you'd like me to go over one that you really enjoy, really like, and would like to know how to do that. Otherwise, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed anything I talked about today. And if you'd like me to do a Photoshop version of this, like I said earlier, just go ahead and hit me up in the comment section below as well. Thank you for watching this video. My name is Ginger of Ginger Republic, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.